Hey everybody, this is Lynn from A Bit of Birdsong, and I'm going to try to share with you how I tea stain and then dye papers for journaling. I have a few sheets to show you how they turned out, and they range from very heavily dyed to not very much, depending on how much ink I used. I love these heavier dyed or more heavily dyed papers. Look at the designs. This one I used a stencil. I love the way it turned out. You can see the other side, it came through. Aren't they pretty? I love this. It almost looks like flowers or a paw print, and it's just the way the inks dry. So I'm going to try to show you how I did this. The first thing I'm doing is heating up some water. This can get messy, so I have a couple of towels out that I don't mind getting a little bit of stain on. I have a large baking dish that I use to lay the papers in, and they soak in there to get darker. Yes, tea bags can be expensive, but I buy them on sale. I really prefer tea over coffee. I like the color that it gives, and I love the way it smells. So I always try to use black tea. I have put other things in before, and I liked the result. I used some turmeric at one point, and it gave the pages a really yellow finish, which I liked. I love the smell of the spices, the chai. These are cloves, so I will put some of that in. You have to be careful with things like whole cloves, because if you press down on the paper with one underneath, it can tear the paper. So just keep that in mind. They can also be really cool because as they sit, the color can come off and make little markings on the paper. You can see how beautiful this water is getting. I love this golden brown color, and like I said, I typically stay away from coffee. I like this color that the black tea gives and the spices, and it really makes the paper smell good. The water is cooling down. I don't want to put my hands in boiling water, of course, so I pour the very hot water and almost boiling. I don't like for it to really be like rolling because I don't want it to destroy the tea bags. But I let it cool before I start putting the papers in. And I actually today might take the cloves out of this water so that I'm not so worried about the paper tearing, especially since I'm going to add some dye to the pages. The water is nice and dark now, and it's cooled off enough that I can put my hands in it. I did take all of the cloves out because I don't want to risk tearing the paper today. I put in one sheet at a time. I'm using my hands right now, but I don't always do that. I have a wooden spoon that I use especially for this. This process can be very drying to your hands. I love to watch Amity Bloom, and she has shown a process where she adds some baking soda, I think it is, to her coffee dye to help with the pH and make the papers more archival. I haven't done that. I don't know if you need to do that for tea. Maybe I'll look into that a little bit more. For now, I'm just putting these papers down in the tea, and as you can see, I did break a couple of the tea bags so that we have some little pieces of tea leaf floating around,
and it'll make some marks on the paper that are really neat. And even if they dry on the paper, once the paper is completely dry and you are working with it, you can just brush those little pieces away, and they do often leave really pretty marks behind. But that's preference. You don't have to leave these in. You could just have a clear, well, not clear, well, clear might be a good word. I don't know. You could just have a stain that doesn't have any debris in it at all. So you're not working with something that's gritty. I do 25. Sometimes I do as many as 50. And it can take some time. I have been drying my papers in the oven on about 300 degrees on baking sheets. I do 2 sheets at a time, and I leave them in there for about, I guess about 4 minutes, maybe 3, because you don't want to start a fire. And it just depends on how wet the pages are. I know that some people use a higher temperature, say 400 degrees, and they only take a minute to dry. I may try that. I'm going to have some ink on these, and I guess I'm just a little bit cautious about running the temperature up really high with the ink on the paper. This is just a process that I use. I'm not telling anybody that anything is particularly safe or unsafe. I am not a scientist. I am careful. I did try to read online about what happens to different things when you heat them up. So definitely use your own mind and caution and what have you when doing something like this. It's the responsibility is on the one who's doing it. And especially be careful if you have children around. All of my children are grown, so it's just me and the cats. Anyway, I'm going to stop here and I will be back. Okay, so I've got everything set up. The paper's been soaking for a while. I, again, have these heavy towels down to protect my countertop. I like to put some aluminum foil beside the pan where I put the papers before they go in the oven. That keeps tea stains and dye and such from going onto the stovetop. And I will probably pull this piece down to cover a little more. I have 2 sheets on my baking pan, and the oven is heated to 300 degrees. If I'm just doing tea stain, I don't usually dab off a lot of extra because I like the designs that the tea gives to the paper. But when I'm using the ink sprays, I do take some of the tea off because I don't want the paper to look dirty as much as just really pretty with the stain and then the bright colors of the ink. You can do just a little bit or you can do a lot. You can also put some in a corner and you can let it run. Now, probably what I'm going to do is flip these pages one time. I might even dry off some of the excess ink. And you can, like, pick some up and move it around, but this ink dries really fast. This is the Dylusions. And again, I don't know if they recommend putting this in the oven. That's what I've done. I seem to be okay. I'm not going to turn it on now, but I have an exhaust fan that will be running while this is in the oven. I'm putting it in at 300 degrees for about 3 minutes. I'll be back. This is the first couple of sheets of paper. It's not a lot of dye on these first 2. Now this one still feels a little bit damp. I actually had to add another minute, so these were in for 4 minutes. And I think I'm going to have to up the temperature just a little bit. I've moved it up to 325, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's what's going on. 2 sheets at a time. I'm only doing 20 some. I pulled out 25 sheets of paper in case, you know, something went wrong and I needed, maybe if one ripped or something. But the goal is to get 20 good sheets and to not spend too much time doing it, because it takes energy and time and jumping up and down, obviously, to take papers out. All right, I'll be back. Okay, I had the bright idea to use this stencil. I think this one might be fun. Now, see, this can get really messy. If I can just lift this up without totally destroying. Okay, well that's going to be. That's going to be cool. When the papers come out of the oven, I just put them to the side. If they're either completely dry or almost dry, with all of this heat coming off of the stove, they will dry pretty quickly, even if they're still a tiny bit damp. And this one is. The colors also seem to brighten up once they completely dry out. So I want to show you the papers that we did, and just the variations and how pretty they turned out. I'm working on a journal right now just using these papers, and I'm going to test it and see how they work. I'm wondering if you would have to use like a fine point Sharpie to really see the ink, but that in itself is kind of exciting. I love pens and paper. Aren't these pretty? They just range from very, very dyed to very faintly dyed, and I love the way that turned out with the stencil. It's just enough to be pretty. It's not too much. So many pretty pages. There is a listing for these pages in my Etsy shop, and I do want to make some more. We'll just flip through. I know you don't have all day, but I did want to show you again just how pretty they turned out. And even like the lines on this one, I want to say that's where I laid a paper towel across it and pressed down, and it left the marks from the paper towel. You can really hear the rain outside. I can. I don't know if you can, but we're having storms, and the storms are here. For sure. We've been getting warnings all day, and they now are here. I hope they won't be too bad. I just love these. Ooh, that's pretty. Looks like a caterpillar or something coming out with a little face. That's interesting. That one turned out a lot darker. Well, we don't have to look at every single one, because I think you've seen the variety. They're just really pretty though. And I did want to share how I did that. Again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert. Just use your own caution and your own thoughts, and be responsible and be safe, and I'll see you next time.